All right, folks, welcome to week 5. So for the 2 lectures this week, we're going to focus on creating GUIs in Java, specifically using JavaFX. You will have to use JavaFX for your final project for the class. So I'll have a few lectures this week, and then a little bit later we will add a few more on. So this week is mainly just to get you sort of up and running with JavaFX and be able to create some, initial windows and maybe some buttons and some other things. So some of the lecture slides here will be more sort of informative, more sort of technical, like this is some of the usage for some of this stuff. And then, later on in the semester, we'll have some of the interactivity where you click on a button and something happens, or you click on an object, or you press stuff keys on your keyboard, and different things happen. So think of today and the next lecture sort of getting down sort of just how to create these windows and how to place buttons and sort of how to get the GUI looking the way that you want it to look. So a GUI, this is the acronym you normally see here is GUI. It's pronounced GUI. It just means it's a graphical user interface. So most of the programs you use have these, windows, menus, buttons, all that other sort of stuff. JavaFX is a library. So there's lots and lots of functions to use that do different things. And really, after you go through CS1, CS2, and maybe a couple other classes when you're sophomores, really what you end up doing is just learning new libraries. Either you'll be creating your own for specific purposes, or you will be using other libraries. So the style and sort of the stuff that you see today will be something that you will potentially be doing quite a bit, or sort of learning about how to use other libraries that people have written. The reason why we might want to use a GUI is because the interaction in our programs has really just been console and command line arguments and reading in files. That's really been it. But most of the programs you use, of course, have this GUI interface. It's a very natural thing to use when you think of sort of mobile applications as well. You certainly don't want to be typing stuff on your phone to run programs. So the GUI is a very natural thing for us to extend into in CS2 after you have sort of more experience from doing the sort of console command line stuff from CS1 and from some of the CS2 stuff that we've done. So JavaFX is the framework. It's the library for developing Java GUIs. Overall, it is an excellent example of OOP, and I'm going to point out some of that as we go through and talk about it. It does replace some older frameworks. So if you look at if you look at like Java GUI stuff, you might see things from the Abstract Window Toolkit, which is AWT, or you might see some stuff from Swing. Those are older ones. JavaFX is sort of the newest thing, although it's not sort of brand new, but it is sort of the newest compared to those. And of course, as times change, something will probably come along later that replaces JavaFX. So if you're staying in computer science, know that the things you're using now may not be the things you use 10 years from now. So we're learning JavaFX now. Swing and AWT are similar, but of course they have their differences, and whatever comes along next as the sort of standard GUI library or sort of GUI framework for Java will probably be similar to JavaFX, but then sort of different in some key things as well. So even though you're learning this now, it certainly doesn't mean you'll be using it forever. So older Java GUIs typically had things like containers and components. So you would create a bunch of containers and then you put your components into them. And this worked well. This worked mostly just fine. JavaFX has a similar sort of idea, but it's more sort of hierarchical in nature. So we're going to see that specifically today. All right, so you can write JavaFX so it runs on a desktop, which is basically what we'll be doing in this class. It can run from a web browser. It has multi-touch support for of course your smartphones and stuff. It can do 2D and 3D animation things. It can play audio. It can play video. So it is a full-featured GUI framework. There's not sort of stuff left out of it. For the final project, which is something we'll probably talk about next week is my guess. I'll give you sort of the initial stuff about what the initial information about what the final project is. A lot of people do games because you can play audio. You can obviously run it from your computer. I haven't had anyone do sort of animation stuff other than just sort of moving objects around, but JavaFX supports all that kind of stuff. So one of our sort of other projects this semester will be messing around with some graphics and a game and sort of see how we can get those two to interact. So JavaFX, it's certainly full featured. All right. So I'm going to jump into Eclipse, and there will be a lot of Eclipse today. I'm going to do some of the examples that I sort of show you, some of the little exercise things that are in the slides. I'm not going to do other ones. Some of them are just to show that here's how you can play some music, or here's how you can, display text boxes and stuff. So I'm not going to code every single one of them, but I do want to code. I do want to live code some of these to give you an idea of how to use it and sort of how I approach doing it. So we are going to create a new project in Eclipse, and we're going to have the class that we create that includes main. We're going to have that extend the application class. Now, this, depending on which version of Java you have, depending on which JDK you have, this is either going to work fine or it's not going to work at all. So I'm going to show you, using sort of two different versions of Java, the process you have to go through to get this stuff working. I'm going to show you with Java 8 first. So if you installed Java 8, then the way that I'm going to show you now will work for all the projects that you create. It's a little bit easier than with Java, I think it's Java 10 plus. So I'll be showing you with Java 11 as well, but anything sort of past 11, it'll be the same process. So I'm going to show you with 8 first, and we're going to write a quick GUI. And then I'll switch over to sort of Java 10 plus, specifically Java 11 on my computer, and I will show you that process. It's a little bit more complicated. Part of it you only have to do once, and then part of it you have to do sort of for every JavaFX project you make. So we will go through that. All right, so I'm gonna hop into Eclipse, and I'm gonna do this piece now, and I'm just gonna show you how this works. So we're gonna create a new project. So I'm gonna come in here, and I'm going to create a new Java project. And specifically, so I'm going to name this, let's see, my JavaFX. Specifically, right now I have two versions of Java installed here. I'm going to make sure that I'm using Java 8. So this is back then the numbering was 1.8, but it's Java 8. So I'm going to make sure that I'm using a specific Java, and I'm going to use Java 8 for this one. We'll use Java 11 for the next one. So I'm going to say finish. So I have my JavaFX here, and I'm going to create that class, and I can name it whatever. I can also just call this one my JavaFX, and make sure that main is part of that one. And so I have my class here. So the first thing to do, if you want to make a JavaFX application, is to write extends application. Now, application will show up as sort of an error, but if you hover over, you will see 6 quick fixes. One of them is import application, and the parentheses it says javafx.application. That's what we want to do. So whenever we import one of these sort of new things that we're about to add to our project, we want to make sure we're grabbing the JavaFX version, because there's also application from, this is COM, Sun, Glass, UI. I don't want that one. That was not related to JavaFX. So I want this first one here, and it might be in a different order on your machine. But I'm going to import application from JavaFX, and you can see it comes up here. So import JavaFX application. Now my class is underlined as red because application has some abstract methods. So I need to make sure that I implement those methods. We talked about abstraction from last week's lectures. So I'm going to add the unimplemented methods, and it gives me this start method. Okay. So that's the very basic beginning to a program. This is what you'll do if you have Java 8. This is typically what you will do. If for some reason you can't find the import JavaFX application, if there's some other sort of issue that comes up, the sort of next slide in the presentation shows a couple of things that you might have to do. They sort of deal with opening up the properties for your project and messing around with a few things, and I have a few screenshots on there, so we'll talk about those in just a second. Main is only going to have one line. It's going to be launch, and then you put in args. So we're just calling a method called launch, and args goes into that, and that's it. You're not going to touch main otherwise. Everything else that we do in this case is going to be in this start method. And I can actually run this right now. It doesn't do anything. I don't have any windows being opened or anything like that, but it is running. If you look at the sort of stop button down here, it is lit. So the program is actually running, and everything sort of is running properly based on what I've just done. So let me show you on the slides the other stuff you might have to do. So I say here, like, depending on your version of Java and Eclipse, you may not have to do this stuff, but you might have to. So you have to right click on your project, properties, go to Java build path, libraries. You have to find where your JDK is, and then make sure that there is this specific jar associated with it. So let me show you how to do that. So in here, I'm going to right click on my project, and I'm going to go down to properties. And then I'm going to go to the Java build path. It's here on the left. And under libraries, I'm going to say add external jars. Now, the jar we're looking for should actually already be in here. It's this one right here, the JFX RT. It should already be in here. It tells you where it is. It's in C, Program Files, Java, in my JDK folder, JRE lib ext. So it should already be in here. But if it is not, then this is typically the place you're going to go look for it if you have Java 8. So I would say something like add external jars, and I already have C program files open, and then I would go Java. I'd grab my version of the JDK, JRE, I think it was it JRE lib ext, and it's right there. So you might have to go searching for where this is. Again, it's called JFX rt.jar, so you could always search your computer for it as well. Once you select that, close this one down, then you go to the next tab, order and export, and you make sure that that one is on the top. So again, shouldn't need to do that. It's not going to change anything here because everything was working already. But if for some reason it doesn't work at this stage and you have Java 8, then you might have to go in and do that. And I have a few screenshots of that as well. So here is the sort of libraries part here where I sort of added this file. I took this screenshot from my Mac, so this is in a different location than it would be on your Windows, and then showing that should be at the top of the order and export. So that's sort of the most that you would have to do. Again, as you noticed, I didn't have to do that at all to have everything working, or at least running it with sort of an empty program. So keep that in mind. Try it with just the initial way that I did it, and then if something goes wrong, try this. If you still can't get it to work, then we might have to have a meeting so I can mess around with it on Zoom. All right. So for JDK 10 plus, it's a little bit more involved. So what I'm going to do is this. We're going to skip this for the moment, and we're going to make our first little window application. And then we're going to create a new project using Java 11, and we're going to follow what these documents here say. So for the first application, I'm going to talk about sort of how this works as I code it up, and then we'll talk a little bit deeper about it. So in Eclipse, I'm going to start with this start method. And I'm going to create, I'm going to say, so we're given this primary stage. This is a parameter. This is the primary stage. Think of the primary stage as the window. Primary stage is the window that we're going to put stuff in. So I can do something like this. I can say primary stage dot set title, and I could put a string. I could say hello world. This is going to set the title of the window. So for example, the title of my window here in Eclipse that I'm using is up here. It has my workspace name, the file I'm in, and then Eclipse IDE. So this is going to put hello world. It's actually going to be centered. It's going to be hello world on my window. But still, if I run this, it's not going to do anything. We're not going to see any windows yet because we still have to do a few things. So when you think of JavaFX, think of a hierarchical model. You start with the window, and then we stack things on top of it. So the primary stage is the window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a scene. So I'm going to create a scene, and I'm just going to call it, I don't know, I'll call it just scene, just lowercase scene. And this is going to be a new scene. And the new scene takes a few things. It takes something that you want to put in the scene, and then a size. So right now, we don't have anything we want to put in the scene. So we need to create that first before we use this. So I'm going to create a pane. And I'm just going to call it, I'll call it root. And this is just going to be a new pane. I need to make sure these are imported. So again, I hover over pane and I can see import pane, JavaFX, scene, layout. So I want to do that one. And then for scene, I'm going to do the same thing. Make sure that I import scene. Now again, scene needs something to put in it. So I created a pane and I'm going to put that pane in the scene. And then the scene is going to be put on the stage. So think of the scene as the thing that composes all the stuff you want to put on it. And then you apply a scene to a stage. Remember, the stage is the window. So I'm going to put the root pane in my scene, and I'm going to give it a size. Let's do 400 by 400. I'll show you sort of how big that is. So the pane here, the pane is what I stack everything on, like buttons, which we're going to do in just a second. And then the scene will contain everything that gets put into the window. So typically you will have some kind of pane and some kind of scene before you ever create sort of before you ever do anything with the primary stage. So the primary stage, I set the title, but I need a pane to stack stuff on, and I need to create a scene that contains all the stuff that's on the pane. Now there's two lines left. I'm going to do primary stage dot set scene, and I'm going to give this scene. So I'm setting the scene in my window as the scene that I created. And then I say primary stage dot show. And so that shows the window. So here we're setting the scene and then displaying the window. So if I run this now, I get my window. You can see hello world. I guess it's not centered in this one, but I think on my Mac it was centered. We're gonna get hello world, and it's a 400 by 400 window, and we can move it around, and it has all the normal decoration stuff that a Windows window has, and yeah, that's your basic sort of how to create a window in Java using JavaFX. Let's add a button. This is not very interesting. We should add something else. So I'm going to create a button, and literally there's a button class. So I'm going to create a button. I'm going to call it BTN, and this is going to be a new button. So I created the button. Notice how button is underlined in red. I need to make sure to import it. So there's a couple of buttons, of course. So things like java.awt, that is one of the buttons, but we don't want to use that. We want to make sure we use JavaFX. If you accidentally click on the wrong one, you just got to come up here and make sure that all of these say JavaFX. JavaFX dot and then something. Now I can adjust properties of the button. So I can say BTN dot, let's do set text. Set text, and I'm going to put on this button, I'm going to put click me. So I can set the text. And if you want to look at what some of these do, if I do BTN dot, you should be able to see all sorts of functions here. So things like button dot fire, button dot focus property, button dot get alignment, button dot get border. There's all sorts of gets. So all these are getters. When we talked about getters and setters, there are tons and tons of getters and setters that you have access to. So there should be a bunch of setters here as well: set border, set clip, set cursor, set layout X, tons and tons of stuff. So the one that we just used was set text right here, but there's tons and tons of these things out there. There's lots and lots of functions. Of course, in this class, we can't go over what everything does, but you'll see the basics. And then if you need to do something like, oh, I want to make sure my button is larger or smaller or a different color or whatever, then you can start going in and messing around with sort of looking up what these other things do, or looking up other tutorials that sort of show you very specific things. So if I run this now, I get this looking thing here, and the button's not around. The button's not on my window. I don't see, there's no button in here. So just creating the button itself isn't good enough, because remember, we're stacking things onto ultimately the scene and then the window. But I haven't done anything with the button. I created the object, but it's not actually part of my scene at all. So to do that, you're going to take your pane, which in this case I'm calling root, and we're going to say get children, and we're going to add my button. So I just added my button to the pane. The pane is, of course, added to the scene, and the scene is set for that window. So now we should see a button right up here. Now it is sort of up in the upper corner. There's ways you can adjust where exactly it's located, but we see the click me button here. It doesn't do anything. It still does like a little like animation stuff. So if your mouse hovers over it, it slightly changes color. If you click it, it changes color as well. So it does the normal sort of Windows button type stuff, but it doesn't do anything. That's interaction stuff that we're going to talk about in the future. But for now, think of this as your basis for writing a quick sort of GUI that you can start adding stuff to. So this right here adds the button to the pane. And here we'll say create the button. Create a button and add text. On the slide that I had, go back to that. There's a couple of different things. Instead of just a regular pane, I used a stack pane rather than a regular pane. So that's something that I'm going to change here in just a second. Also, instead of explicitly creating a scene and then using the scene there, I just used new scene and then put the root and a window size. So you don't necessarily have to have the scene hanging around as a variable, because usually you're just putting it into the set scene on the stage. So you don't necessarily need to have that. So there's a couple differences here, but there's not really any sort of major difference as far as the what it looks like ultimately. Let's change the pane here. Let's change this to a stack pane. So call it stack pane. So I'm just going to use this. And I need to make sure to import it. So this comes from JavaFX. So use a stack pane here. And there are lots of different types of panes. Just make sure to save and run. Now you see that it's centered. Now, there's other ways that we can move this around, but the stack pane is a pane that sort of helps you with some of the formatting. So the different types of panes can be very useful depending on your situation. For example, there are grid panes. Grid panes let you literally have stuff in a grid. That could be useful for, say, some sort of turn-based game, or if you want to make some kind of chess game, or any sort of game where something is in a regular grid. That is one of the possibilities for the different types of panes that you can use. So there's lots of panes. We'll talk about some of them, but just the base pane is something that you can use. That's sort of the most basic pane. And then there's more complicated ones that have more options and do different things, like the stack pane. All right, so the fact that we have this working is good. So I'm going to basically take the same code here, and we're going to get this working with a Java 11 version. So let's start with that right now. So I'm going to leave this file open here, and I'm going to create a new Java project. And I'm going to make sure that the JRE that I'm using for this one is my JDK 11. And I'll just name this my JavaFX 11. I'll say finish. You don't need to create a module in one of the module info files. If you do this, you can always delete it. Typically, I'm not going to create this. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this my JavaFX 11, and I make sure that there's a main. So the same thing I did before. So here we go. And I need to do that that extends application. Same thing as for the previous one. But if I hover over application, there is no option to import something from JavaFX. So the reason for this is that starting with Java 10, they removed JavaFX from the standard Java JDK, which means we have to download it and then add it back to it sort of manually. So slide-wise, on this slide here, I list a website. This has the full sort of how to get this stuff to work. So we're going to go to this webpage. I already have it open, and I'm going to walk you through what to do. So this is where that link goes. We want to look at, over here on the left, we want to look at JavaFX and Eclipse. So I click on that and open that up. And we want to follow the instructions for the non-modular projects. So it tells us what to do. It's got screenshots of all the stuff here. It's got a warning that we'll take a look at in just a little bit. And then this sort of final step here, sort of add VM arguments. And then essentially we'll be done at that point. So this is what we want. Non-modular projects, or make some changes. You do need to download JavaFX. So they have a link for that. It's right here. So if we go there, I downloaded the 11.0.2 version. And I'll show you where that is. It's just going to download a zip for you, and you'll want to unzip it, but you'll want to remember where it is located. So wherever you unzip it to, wherever you put it on your hard drive, whether that's on the desktop, whether you put it somewhere else special, you're going to want to make sure you remember where it is. If you want to get the latest release of JavaFX, they have JavaFX 15, but typically I go for some of the long-term support ones when I'm downloading these. So the JavaFX 11 is a long-term support, so they'll keep sort of releasing updates for it and fixes and stuff for it. So that's the one you want to download. It'll come in as a zip. Unzip it and put it where you want it, but remember where it's located. For me, I put it, let's see if I can bring it up over here. I put it sort of along with my other Java stuff. So as an example, in my C drive, program files Java, where all my JDKs are located, that's where I unzipped it to. So this is the JavaFX SDK 11.0.2. So that's where I put it. That way it's along with the rest of my Java stuff. But again, you can put it wherever you would like. All right, so that's where you download it from. And then we need to create a new library in Eclipse. Now, I've already created this library, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So we jump into Eclipse. We go Window, Preferences. We open up Java. We go to build path, we open that up. So we do the drop down on Java, drop down on build path, and then we click on user libraries. Now I already have JavaFX 11 in here, but since I imagine that most of you do not, you're going to say new. You're going to give it a name. So let me actually just remove this one and do it completely new. So I'm going to call this one JavaFX 11. Say OK. Right now it's empty. There's nothing in it. It's just an empty library that I just created. So we need to make sure we have it highlighted and click on Add External Jars. And then you want to go find where you install or where you unzipped the JavaFX SDK. So for me, it was right here, C program files Java, and then here's my Java SDK. And you should be able to just select that folder. Actually, no, we want to add the jars themselves. So you want to go into lib, and we want to take all the jars that are here, and we want to click open on them. So I did program files, Java, where I unzipped it to, lib, and then I grabbed these jars. You don't have to grab the source zip here. You just have to grab the jars. and I'll say open. So what it does is it adds them all in. So you can see all those jars are now part of this library. You only have to do this once. Once you have this library put into Eclipse, you don't have to do it again. Of course, if you reinstall Eclipse or something, or you have to deal with some sort of refresh on your computer, you reinstall your OS or something, then you're going to have to do this again. But for the version of Eclipse that you're using and what you'll probably use for the entirety of the class, you don't have to do this again. After that, I say apply and close. So you only have to do that once. Once that's set up, then for our project, I can right-click on the project. I can go down to Properties. And in my Libraries tab under Java Build Path, Libraries tab, I'm going to click on the class path. Make sure that's highlighted. And I'm going to say Add Library. I'm going to add a user library. It's the last one there. And the one I want to add is JavaFX. So under the class path, you will see JavaFX 11, the library that you created. Say apply, and I'm going to say apply and close. Now if I hover over application, should pop up, there we go. Now I can see import application from javafx.application. Now I get that capability. So that part that I just did, where you have to go and right-click on your project, properties, go to the build path and add the library to the class path, that you will have to do for every project. So you have to keep this in mind. And again, all of that is on that web page. So all of that's here. So this is the part where you create the new user library. Then you create your Java project. It tells you don't have to create that module file. Then you'll go in and you will see it's got it right here, adding it to the class path. So it shows the class path. Make sure you get the user library that you created. So it shows you how to do that there. There's one last thing that we have to do, but I'm going to show you what happens if you don't do it first. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take all of the stuff from our other Java 8 version, from that file, and basically just copy and paste it in. So we should get the same window. So take all that stuff that I just had, copy and paste it in. It looks like it put all the imports in there for me, and I'm going to run it. And it doesn't work. It says JavaFX runtime components are missing and are required to run this application. On that website, it talks about that. That says, hey, if you run the project now, it will compile. So it sort of seems like it's going to work, but then you get that JavaFX runtime components are missing. So it tells you why that issue is there. But it says we got to do one thing to fix it. Add VM arguments. You want to make sure you're on the right tab here. Click on the one for your operating system. And we're going to copy this line, and I'm going to show you where to put it in Eclipse. After we do this, then everything will work. So we go back to Eclipse, and we right-click on our project, and we go down to Run As, Run Configurations. Make sure you're on the right project with the right main class. So this is my JavaFX 11, and the class is my JavaFX 11. That's the one that we're in. You go to the Arguments tab, and under VM Arguments, you paste in that line from the website. But we have to change the stuff in the quotes. This needs to be the path to where our JavaFX SDK is located. So mine was in C:/. Let's see. Make sure I got the right slash here. Depending on your OS, slashes end up being different. So I do C:/. Mine is in program files /Java / the name of the folder in my Java folder that I have it, JavaFX SDK 11.0.2 /bin /lib. That's what we want. This is the place where that folder is located. That path has to be in there and correct. I'll click apply, and then I'll click run, and now I get the window. So the two steps that I showed you now, adding in that VM argument and making sure the library was part of the class path, that's what you will have to do if you're using Java 10 plus every single time you create a new project. So my recommendation is to make sure that you have this web page somewhere easily accessible to you, and then just follow down to getting this argument in. And once that's in, then you're good to go. Then it says run the project. There's another thing you can do to make this a little bit easier on you the next time you have to do it. You can read that. You can read that here. Otherwise, that's it, because the next we'll talk about FX clips in a little bit, but you don't have to worry about Maven, or I think Gradle's down here further. You don't have to worry about Maven or Gradle. You just have to worry about all the way down to just past this little VM argument here. So that's the process that you'll have to go through. Again, if you have JavaFX 8 or if you have JDK 8, you likely won't have to do any of this. But of course, in the future, if you're using an updated version of Java and you want to use JavaFX, then you might have to go through this process. So again, that web page is super useful. It shows screenshots. It's basically what I would have put in slides if the web page didn't already exist. All right. So let's get back to talking about JavaFX and sort of how it works. So it is platform independent. You know, if you're on Linux, if you're on Mac, if you're on Windows, you're going to get the same sort of look, just with the appropriate decorations, so the appropriate like bar stuff at the top, and sort of the appropriate looking buttons for that operating system. So the basic structure is this: you extend application. In main, you change main to have one line, launch args. You override start, and then you populate your stage with whatever you want. So again, typically what's going to happen is you're going to have one stage, you're going to create one scene, and then on that scene, you're going to populate with a bunch of stuff. You might have, like I said, some panes. We used a pane, we used a stack pane. You might have a bunch of buttons. You might have other text and text boxes for people to type in, and all sorts of stuff. So it's this sort of hierarchical thing that's happening. Typically, a pane is going to go on a scene. The scene goes on the stage is the window. So you're just stacking a bunch of stuff up. That's really what you're doing in JavaFX. You're doing this sort of stacking idea. You can have multiple windows. So we're going to do that right now. All that means is we're just going to have multiple stages. So if you want to have a new window get created, or you want to have your program that has a couple of windows in it, then you just have to create a new stage. You're given a stage initially, the primary stage. That's sort of the primary window. But you can create as many stages as you want, to have as many windows as you want. So let's just go sort of elsewhere in the code. It doesn't matter really where we put it here. So maybe up here at the top, I'm going to create another stage. So I just need to do stage. And let's call this stage 2. This is going to be a new stage. So that's going to be another window. We're not showing it yet, but it is another window. And let's create another scene. So I'm going to call this scene 2. And this will be a new scene. And let's do the sort of one line thing. Let's create a pane, a new pane in here, and then we will do let's see, we'll have this be a little bit smaller, maybe 100 by 150 or something. I need to make sure to import pane, because it hadn't been imported yet. So I created a stage, another stage, created a second scene, and then I'm going to take my stage 2, set scene, and we're going to set this to scene 2. And then we're going to do stage 2.show. It doesn't really matter where I do it in here, because none of this is sort of going to wait. And this can present a challenge when you're messing around with sort of trying to create a game or something. So that's something that we'll talk about in the future. So if I run this, I will now get my original Click Me window. And here's that other window that's a little bit small here. So sort of messing around with it this way, it's a little small to sort of move it around, because I don't have any sort of grip at the top, but you sort of get the idea here. I created another stage, created a scene, put a little pane in it, set the scene, and then showed it. So you can have other windows that come up. You can have multiple windows in your program. It's just a matter of creating a new stage, and JavaFX can do that. All right. So there is a UML relationship between all these things. So we're going to look at some shapes in just a second. But in the end, you have a stage. And you have a scene. And you have this little diamond, sort of the little diamond arrow thing here. And we saw that in the Blackjack document. This means it's composed. And right now it's showing a 1. So a stage is composed of one scene. That's what the diagram is telling us. And then the scene is the scene is composed of one parent. All of which are nodes. It could take a little bit to decipher all of this, but a node, for example, can compose many panes can compose a node. That's what the star is here. So the UML relationship is a little bit complicated, but the idea is that you attach something to the scene, one thing, like we saw the panes, and then you attach that to the stage. And a pane is a child of a parent. So a pane is a parent. So that's why we could put a pane into the scene because of this relationship. Now there's a bunch of different panes. So pane is sort of a base class that we can use, but there's a whole bunch of different panes. We saw stack pane. We saw this one. But there's other ones. There's border panes, which are quite useful. Grid panes, HBox, VBox, flow panes. I mentioned grid pane. There's all these different types of panes, and you can actually stack them on each other. You could have a border pane and then put a grid pane inside of the border pane. So again, it's a bunch of stacking. Think of it as stacking up a whole bunch of stuff to get a bunch of panes and buttons and images and shapes. Think of stacking them all up to get something that is useful or visually pleasing to look at. Some other nodes. So this is sort of a pane is a parent, which is a node. So you can take a pane, you can slap it onto a scene, slap it onto the stage, you got your window. Other nodes are things like shapes. So we're going to draw a circle here in the next slide. But things like lines and ellipses and stuff, we'll talk more about those. Image view is also a node, so you can display an image. This is how students in the past have displayed like sprites onto the screen. And any sort of so those are nodes. There's more to this. So I sort of chopped this down a little bit. Control is also something that is a parent. So its control is kind of like a pane. And control are things like buttons and checkboxes and text areas and all that other kind of stuff. So it's not too complicated for the UML relationship. It just sort of happens over here that a scene needs a parent. And that can either be something like a button or something like a pane. We can take nodes and we can stick as many of them as we want to onto a pane. But a pane is also a node. If we follow the arrows, a pane is also a node, just like a shape is a node and an image view is a node. And a button is a node. So that's why we can take a button, throw it onto a pane, and then the pane we can take, because the pane is a parent, throw it onto the scene, throw it onto the stage. So it can be a little bit complicated when you first see it, but in the end, it's just a sort of a UML relationship version of you stack a bunch of stuff onto a pane, throw that onto the scene, and then put it onto the window. All right, let's do a circle. Let's create a circle here. So I'm going to clear out all the stuff that I have in this one, and we'll start fresh with our circle. So I'm actually going to create a circle. So I'll call it circle C, and this is going to equal, I should make this just a tad bigger here. This is going to equal a new circle. So I have a circle object. I need to make sure to import it. So there's a JavaFX version. That's the one I want. And then I'm going to use the circle object name, the C that I said, and I'm going to set a bunch of properties. So I'm going to use a bunch of the setters. So I'm going to say set, And let's do set center X. So the X position of the center, let's set that to 100. And then set center Y, let's set that to 100 as well. So we'll decide the size of our window here in a second. And then let's set the radius to maybe 50, half of where we are in the screen. And let's do set stroke, which needs a color. So I'm going to do color dot black. And we'll do set set fill, and I'll put in a color dot white. This should be all caps. There we go. So the autocomplete should sort of help you out with this, but these aren't really anything special. They're stuff that I know because I've been doing this for a while, that we can set the radius and the stroke and the fill, and you can play around with them some, and you can look at a bunch of these different setters, because there's lots of these setters out there to set different properties of the circle. So I know that these exist. These are useful ones to know that if they exist, if you want to draw shapes onto the screen, and most of the shapes have these. If we draw rectangles, that's the same style of thing. Let's create a pane, and I'm just going to call it pane, and this is a new pane. And then let's do pane dot get children dot add, and let's add that circle C. So that's something I have to do, otherwise we won't see the circle. We need to add it to the pane. The get children part here is it's obviously necessary, but the reason why it's there is because get children is giving you a list of everything that you've stacked on the pane, and so we're going to add something to that list. So that's the idea of having to do this get children dot add rather than just pane dot add, because we're getting the list of everything that's added to it, and we're going to add more to it. All right, and then we just do the normal thing. So I'm going to create a scene. I'm just going to call it S. This is a new scene. And this is going to be the sort of base pane. The parent in here is going to be the pane. And then let's make this 200 by 200. That'll work for us. And then we'll do primary stage dot set. We'll do set scene, and we'll set this to the S, the scene that I just created, and then we'll say primary stage dot show. When I run, we get our circle, and I can of course increase the size. But notice how the circle stays exactly where it is. So I can sort of take the handles here and mess around with it, but the circle doesn't move at all. If I want to change the color of something in here, we could maybe change the fill maybe to red. And you can see what specifically changing the fill does. So I have the red stroke, or I have the black stroke. So that's the line. And then I have a red fill. We can also do something like this. We can say C dot set stroke. I think it's going to be set stroke width. So it's here. This takes a double. So maybe I want the stroke width to be 5. So now the line should end up being thicker around the edge. So there's all sorts of these little things to play with, and you can take a look at them from when you use the setter. So that's the idea for a shape, and we'll talk about a few other shapes here in just a second. The coordinate system in JavaFX might be a little bit different than what you're used to. So it's in the upper left. That's 0, 0. So to go down in the screen, you go positive Y. And to go right in the screen, you go positive X. So that's the idea here. Positive Y is down, positive X is to the right. So it's slightly different potentially than what you might be used to from sort of other coordinate systems. But it's just something to keep in mind. If you want to go down, you have to go positive X, or positive Y. If you want to go up, you got to go negative Y. All right, so that's our circle. But as you saw, if I tried to resize it, it didn't really work too well. So you have a couple options. You can not allow resizing. So you can say primary stage dot set resizable false, and then you won't be able to actually click on the edge of the window and drag it. But one of the things that JavaFX does is it adds this property binding thing. So I'm going to show you what this does with this circle. It lets you check if some value in the program is changing, and then it can also change another value in the program. So, for example, if I drag the window's getting larger. Well, maybe when the window gets larger, maybe I want to change the position of the circle. So it allows you to connect these two sort of seemingly sort of separate variables into something that they sort of change together. So you do this by setting some properties. So I'm gonna code this in. It's just something we can add, and you'll sort of see what it does. So it doesn't really matter where I put it here. So I'm going to take my circle dot center x property. So that's the property of the center of this circle in the x on the x-axis. Dot bind. So we're going to bind it to the pane dot width property dot, and then we're going to do divide 2. So the center x value is now bound to the width of the pane divided by 2. That's the idea here. So hopefully this sort of makes sense. We'll change that to y, and we're going to change this one to height. So center x and center y are now bound to the width and the height. And if I run this now, and I do a click drag, as the height and the width of the pane change, because the window size is changing, the circles x and y center are also changing. So there is some nice sort of useful things you can do. Previous sort of GUI versions, like AWT, for example, didn't have this type of thing. So it allows you to do some good stuff with resizing. If it's not something you want to mess with, or if resizing would sort of mess up your program in some way, then you can just disable the resizing, like I showed in the previous slide. All right, so I have a few of these sort of UML looking diagrams with descriptions, and these are basically from the book. I just want to point out a couple of them to you. The color class is something that we use to pick the color for the stroke and the fill. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do with the color class. You don't have to just set color.black or color.white. You can create a new color and give it values based on red, green, blue, and also alpha channel. You can there's a bunch of static colors, which is typically what you'll see me use. But then there's ways to create a color that's brighter than this version of the color. So if you create a color and you want something a little brighter, you just do that color dot brighter, and it gives you a new color that's a little bit brighter. You can create colors using RGB with 0 to 1 as the value, or with 0 to 255, depending on sort of what system you want to use. There's lots of stuff. This is not everything with color. There's lots and lots of possibilities here. So this is something that you may very well be using in the future for projects that you're working on, just being able to get a color and sort of fill shapes or fill regions with a particular color. Here's another example. I'm not going to bother coding this one up because it's pretty much the same as what you just saw with the circle, but I do show a slightly different thing with the color. So here in the color, these are creating rectangles, and it basically goes from top left corner and bottom right corner. So that's what these are. So the top left of this one would be 5, 5. The bottom right would be 50 and 40, and that's going to give you this first square that's here, this red and green one. So the fill is red, the stroke is green. Set the stroke width to 3. Those are things that we messed around with for our circle. The second rectangle uses color.rgb and then give it some RGB values in ints. So this is creating a particular color based on RGB. There's also HSB as well. Typically, I see this as typically I use V for the value, but they did HSB in this one. So this can get you some sort of just a different way of mapping colors, and then the stroke size changed here as well. So it's just a few different ways to use the colors. So if you want something specific, say for example you want to use Wentworth specific colors, you can create colors in your program that are exactly what the sort of Wentworth official colors are. All right, there's a font class as well. This lets you mess around with the size of the font and the family that it comes from. So, what the font is, the name of the font, all that kind of stuff. And you can use, you send in strings for like the name and doubles for the size and stuff. So you can create a font object and then use that as the font that you use to write stuff on your actual window. So changing fonts, relatively easy. I show an example of that here. I'm not going to code this one up, but this is a way that you can sort of look at this and see sort of how the sort of text is being added. So things like creating a text object and then being able to set the font to, in this case, Tahoma. And so there's a few other things with that, with like labels and stuff. So if you're interested in coding this one up to sort of see how it works, all that code is right here. It's sort of meant to mimic like a login for a user. All right, we will mess around with the image class a bit later on, but you can read an image from a file name, so something from your project, for example, or from a URL. So you can actually grab something off the internet with this as well. There's a few things like the height and the width and how much of the image has been loaded. Typically, you probably don't end up using this one, the progress here, but you can get information about the image. And this is what we end up using when we want to do something with a sprite or something like that. We create an image, so we load that particular image, that image file into an image object. And then we use the image view class to view the image. So one of the constructors here takes an image, and another one takes a file name or a URL. So you can create an image, say as part of your object, say the like blackjack game. You might need an image for the front and the back of the card. So you could create an image object in your card object, and then use image view to display it. So image view is actually how you display this stuff. So we'll go back over some of these and sort of I'll show you the usage of them, but I just want to give you an idea of what these classes are called, so that if you want to go look them up and sort of see how they work and play around with them, because with our basic sort of window that we've already created, you can play around with all of this stuff. The media player class is how you play things like video or audio. So, example, it's got things like the volume and the duration and ways to play, pause, or seek as part of it. This particular version here has some interaction. So this sort of area right here is something that we will talk about later. It's something that gives interaction with a play and pause, but this is playing a particular MP3. Is what this particular code does. So we will come back and look at that sort of stuff later, but I want to give you an example so that if you want to mess around with this stuff, feel free to. You have the basics right now of how to create a window and mess around a little bit. So it could be beneficial to you to play around with some of this. All right, there's a whole bunch of different panes. So JavaFX has a whole bunch of them. Pane is just the base class, so it's very simple. There's a flow pane, which is just row by row vertically or column by column horizontally. Border panes have this sort of left, right, or this sort of top, right, left, bottom, center regions. So I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. Stack pane stacks everything vertical, centered. That's why the button was centered in our window, because we use the stack pane. Grid pane makes a 2D grid, and then you can have H boxes and V boxes. Now, keep in mind, you can add these things on top of each other. So you could have a stack pane in the center of a border pane, or you could have a grid pane in the center of a border pane. So these things all stack. You don't just have to pick a pane and that's all you use. You can stack many of these things together. So here's what the border pane looks like. You have a top region, a bottom region, left, right, and center. So you can put things in the individual regions. Maybe I just want a button on the bottom and I want an image in the center. You can do that. There are ways that you code it up to do it. A flow pane typically has, depending on whether you use the vertical one or the horizontal one, you choose stuff like the gaps and like the vertical gap, horizontal gap, whether stuff's on the left, right, top, bottom, that sort of thing. So it has a bunch of options for you to set where things are located. The example for the border pane is here. So if you want to see this style, and you want to mess around with adding things into the center or the bottom or the left or the right or the top, you can mess around in here and set stuff in. HBoxes and VBoxes do sort of exactly what you might think. The VBox sets stuff up vertically. HBox sets stuff up horizontally. And again, you can stack these on other panes. So maybe on a bottom pane of a border pane, you want an HBox to set stuff up horizontally inside of that bottom pane. So you can do all of that stuff. Some of the shapes here that you have access to, these are all nodes: text, lines, circles, rectangles, ellipses, arcs, polygons, polylines. I'm going to show you a few of sort of what these things do, and then what their basic usage looks like, and then we'll sort of finish up for now. All right, so the text sort of object is relatively simple. You're going to have the X and Y. You can change the font, underline, strike through, that sort of normal stuff. You can create a new text object and just start with text string, and you can put whatever string you want in there. So new text, put a string. The text is sort of set up like this. So you pick your X, Y, the text is displayed. And then you can get the width, get the height of what the sort of the text is, so you can center it appropriately and do sort of whatever you need. So when you put the text in, it'll be sort of in this box, and then you'll be able to grab different values here. For a line, it has a start X, start Y, and an end X and an end Y, and it will draw the line between the values. Rectangles, again, relatively simple. You give it, they have an X and a Y. There's a height and a width. You can also mess around with the sort of corners and stuff to do this. So there's lots of opportunities here to mess around with rectangles and draw them where you want them. There's also this arc width and arc height. These are ways to make sort of a curved sort of piece on here, sort of a curved corner. Circles, we have the center X, center Y, radius, and you saw how we could sort of create those. So there's lots of shapes that you can use to start messing around with some simple things. Go back and take a look at some of the examples. I highly recommend at least messing around with the, let's see, the one that was back here, the pane one here, and sort of get an idea of sort of what that pane sort of does, because it is quite a useful one. Otherwise, that's basically it for this sort of initial JavaFX stuff. We're going to sort of switch to a slightly different JavaFX thing next time. It'll probably be a relatively short lecture next time, but we will do some more JavaFX. It's going to show you some FXML stuff. Yeah, so for now, we're probably just going to leave it here. And yeah, I think for this upcoming week, I think I'll probably give out the next homework assignment, and we'll probably talk a little bit about when the first quiz is going to be. So maybe expect that in the next lecture, provided it's a bit shorter. So that's all I have for now. One of the big things that you're going to want to do is get JavaFX working, whichever version of Java you have. So go back to the beginning of the lecture and make sure that if you're using Java 8, that you can get everything working, or if you're using Java 11 or 15 or whatever version you might have downloaded, make sure that everything is working for JavaFX, because you will have to use this in the future, specifically for your final project. So that is all. So I will see you guys next time.